All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us to kick off Crested Butte's Transportation and Mobility Plan with a 5-part introductory webinar series. Today is the first of 5 where we're going to talk all about walkable and bikeable friendly communities. So thank you all so much for being here. We currently have 12 attendees on. We had 25 register. And we will be posting a recording of this meeting on the Transportation Plan website after the fact. So if you like what you hear and if you've learned a lot, please share it out with your friends. I am Mel Yema. I'm the Town of Crested Butte's Long Range Planner. I'm joined today by Troy Russ, the town's Community Development Director, Jenna Green, planner with the town, as well as our speaker, Mr. Dan Burden, who I will introduce with his full bio in just a few minutes. And I also just want to thank our town council members who are listening in today. We have Gabi Prochaska, Jason Macmillan online. So thank you so much for joining us, as well as our other town staff from other departments for tuning in as well. All right, so this webinar will be 1 hour long, lunch and learn style webinar. What we're going to do is start quickly with just an icebreaker to see kind of who's on the call. We're going to spend a few minutes with a quick overview of what is this transportation and mobility plan and kind of what is the process to expect for how the town is going to draft it. Then I'll turn it over to Dan for his presentation. And we will, following up with that, we'll have a question and answer where you'll have opportunities to ask questions to Dan. We're so excited to have him here today. And we'll wrap up with a slide on what's next, promoting our next 4 webinars, our mobility survey, and our winter walking audit, and ways to keep participating in this plan. All right, so let's kick off with a quick icebreaker. We're going to use Mentimeter. If you've been on town meetings before, we love using this polling software. So if you want to pull up a phone or open a new browser on your computer and go to this website at the top, www.menti.com, and use the code 46453490. It's just going to ask you a quick icebreaker to make a word cloud, and we'd love to hear today, where's your favorite place or street to walk on or bike in the town of Crested Butte? So we'll give you all a minute or two to fill that out, and we're excited to see kind of the different perspectives of who's on the call today. Right, so we're starting to see Peanut Lake Road is a big one. Elk Avenue, that Elk Avenue downhill, especially for the townies. We heard that's a very popular as we went through our Elk Avenue one-way, two-way discussion over the past few years. Butte Avenue to Three Ladies Park. Let's see what else is out there. All over town. It is fun to just kind of cruise around town, whether walking or biking. Townie's Trail, really great trail access right from town. And McCormick Ranch Road, definitely a lovely place to walk or bike. All right, we'll give about 30 more seconds. We've had 9 folks do the icebreaker with 14 attendees on currently. Let's see if we'll get any other responses, and then we'll move on. Looping around town and all of the bridges, definitely really fun, especially in adaptive sports centers, Bridges of the Butte event. All right, well, thank you for filling out the icebreaker. It's just helpful to break the ice and see, as we talk about walkable and bikeable friendly communities, where in town you really enjoy doing that today. So moving on, let's start with what is the transportation and mobility plan. We officially kind of launched this last week in a newsletter to those engaged on the town's community engagement list. And the hopefully by now you've heard of the Community Compass or participated in that over the last about 2 years. And the Community Compass was adopted last fall by the Crested Butte Town Council. And what that is the town's comprehensive plan. And it also set forth a 5-year strategic plan outlining goals and strategies for the town of Crested Butte and the town council to focus on for the next 5 years. Of those goals, one of those, which was discussed a lot during the Compass, was a goal around mobility to de-emphasize cars and focus on walking, biking, and transit. And the first strategy within that goal is to conduct a comprehensive re-examination of how people move throughout the town through a transportation master plan. So that is what this plan is about, to look at our challenges and opportunities when it comes to how people move throughout the town, to work on meeting that goal of de-emphasizing cars and focusing on walking, biking, and transit. So how are we going to go about doing that? We have split this plan into 3 general phases. The first we really kicked off internally back in January, and this first phase is all about data collection and plan preparation. So we've been doing a lot of data collection and analysis, where we spent last summer collecting speed data and traffic volume data all around town. So we're working on analyzing that. We have gotten great data from our partners at Mountain Express and the RTA and from our parking management program. And really looking at what is kind of the hard data that we have when it comes to mobility, as well as doing a data survey to the community to understand how people really move throughout the town. So we will reshare a link and QR code to that at the end of this, but if you haven't already, please take that mobility survey, because it's really helpful to see how you move throughout the town when it comes to frequency, different locations, modes of travel, and things like that. To kick off this plan with the plan preparation, we are also doing this introductory webinar series to bring in transportation and mobility experts, similarly to how we launched the Community Compass, to really learn from other case studies and kind of best practices and tools out there when it comes to transportation planning. And then throughout this phase, we will also be recruiting workshop participants, which I'll talk about those workshops in just a second. And then we'll be concluding this phase in early April with a town council retreat to really kick off the plan in earnest with the town council. Our next phase in May through June is all about identifying our mobility challenges and opportunities. So we're going to start in early May with a community open house, where we're going to present all the data we found and then start honing in on where are our big challenge areas and what areas do we want to focus on. And then let's start brainstorming some solutions and opportunities to meet those challenges. For that brainstorming, we plan to convene 8 half-day workshops on different focus areas, ranging from walkability and bikeability to transit to parking and lots of different topics. So we have a list of those on the website for the transportation plan. And if you are interested in participating, we have an email sign up there, and we'll also be specifically reaching out to certain stakeholders in the communities to participate as well. From those workshops, we plan to recruit 2 members from each workshop to form an advisory committee, similarly to what we did with the Community Compass. We held a series of workshops and then recruited from those workshops to form a final advisory committee to really kind of keep that buy-in and involvement through the planning process. And then we'll wrap up that phase with a town council retreat as well. That will lead into the rest of the summer and the fall of putting the plan together. So we'll take all that data, we'll take all that community feedback and draft a plan, which will work with our advisory committee to review and refine, and then present that draft plan to the community to review, provide feedback on in a community feedback period, and through lots of presentations to work through refining that plan and adopting it. So with that, I want to turn it over to our esteemed speaker today, Mr. Dan Burden. We're so excited to have him here. So Dan is going to talk all about walkability and bikeability in communities, and he is quite the person to do that. So Mr. Burden has over 40 years of experience in community and transportation planning and urban design, and specializes in active transportation studies, trail design, safe routes to school, traffic calming, traffic management, and as a trainer for national, regional, state, and local courses in complete streets, bicycling, walkability, land use development, and street connectivity. He's noted for his abilities to plan, design, and facilitate workshops, walking audits, and charrettes. and he is a nationally recognized authority on bicycle and pedestrian facilities and programs, focusing on the built environment, livable communities, healthy streets, traffic calming, and other design and planning elements that affect roadway environments. His goal is to bring many professions closer together to retool and rebuild communities by focusing on engineering, planning, health, development, placemaking, architecture, advocacy, historic preservation, and landscape architecture. This focus creates engaging activity centers, prosperous business districts, well-connected neighborhoods, and great waterfronts, parks, trails, and open spaces with an emphasis on people and active living. Dan is especially known for his ability to draw people with different issues and points of view together around common values and with a common desire to build more complete, holistic, healthy, and prosperous communities. So thank you so much for being here, Dan, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mel. And can everyone see the screen now, or I need to share? Is that right?
Yep, it's good
okay.
now.
Okay, let me go to the full screen mode. All right, well, it's a treat for me to be on your webinar series and to lead off with the most basic form of movement, walking, and I'll tie into that all of active transportation and help develop the vocabulary and set the stage for the questions that come up. So I've launched with a set of topics that I think are quite appropriate for Crested Butte. And essentially, I'll walk through each of these. These seem to be essential topics to discuss to have a robust mobility plan. So I also wish to put an emphasis that if we were to develop our cities for people, then we're going to generate great health among all our people, but also a healthy community, one that's affordable. And so all of these elements, I'm hopeful to get across in this presentation. And then I'll start with one real core item. For 60, 70 years, we've been planning our cities, I'll say over planning our cities to move our cars. And we've got to stop doing that. The cars are going to be well served if at this point, people can get around on their own by foot, by bike, by transit. So the emphasis here, and I'm so pleased that your plans call for this, is to focus on people and places first. And then to focus also on what people value the most. And the sad thing is that most communities in the US are building for the car and not for what they value. So so pleased that Crested Butte is getting back to this. A great friend of both Troy's and mine is Ian Lockwood, an engineer who really gets it. And I just think this cartoon illustration really emphasizes it. The kids have figured it out. It's the adults who have to get their legs back on the ground and realize that there are some pretty good and simple answers out there. I also am delighted with your compass. I've never seen anything quite so easy to understand and appropriate to the scale and the needs of Crested Butte. So very quickly, I want to assure that I'm on the right track. I've worked in Crested Butte. It's been decades. And I'm in love with your community for many reasons. And so these are images I took quite a while ago. So bear with me on this, but it's the right stage to be working from and within. And I just feel the funkiness and the flavor of a community. And I really do think you've got the greatest canvas to work from. And we'll talk about that, but I also want to celebrate your people. I enjoy watching the people of Crested Butte, watching others, and then being watched by others. This is just absolutely special. And then, of course, having the way to get around on their townies and the next generation. I suspect this fellow is now in his mid-20s, but what a treat. But I'm also going to focus on the needs of the elders. And I myself, I'm about to turn 80. So it's an issue that I think Crested Butte needs to also honor. So let's go into the principles. The scene on the left was transformed to the scene on the right. And the point I want to make is, yes, we can have people move by foot, but not honor the fact that that's what they can be doing and should be doing. So in this case, we were able to rebuild the bridge and make it a point of interest all in itself, and then move the car down to a narrower lane and farther away from the pedestrian. So all these elements are necessary if people are going to walk, if that's going to be their first choice. So I've come up with a list of the elements I think are critical. And number one is security. People won't walk if they don't feel security and safe. It's got to be the most convenient way to get around and provide for the efficiency of movement and the comfort and the welcome. So built into this, obviously, is the access with the efficiency. So real quickly, just to further set the stage for Crested Butte, there are communities that are so poorly laid out that you can't walk, that there's going to be high traffic on certain streets because you don't have the right connectivity. So the first element, and I'm pleased this is part of your compass, is to connect your community. And the good news is you're well laid out for that. And likewise, to have many destinations. All of this is truly what's going to make walking the preferred choice over driving and then searching for a parking space. So this is part of your notation, but I think the really good news is the pioneers who settled Crested Butte did it for walking, and so you've already got a 15-minute city. So with that, let's look at the parts. And first of all, I'm delighted with your block lengths and the perimeter. This is the natural way. It gives you not only your connectivity, but it helps give you the platform for bringing the speeds down to the level that you would like. And so I just did a quick search by Google Earth to figure out some of the dimensions you're working from. And elk gives you the opportunity for doing some pretty bold and fun things in the future. We'll talk about that when we get into the solutions. And likewise with your local streets. This dimension, 26 feet, is referred to as a yield street, but it's not operating as a yield street today, simply because there's so much off-street parking. But this is the actual physical space for bi-directional traffic that would be needed to move cars. So again, I'm trying to set the stage for what I consider a truly walkable community. The next point under the principles is the ideal for a street is only 50% is for movement of motor vehicles. The other 50% should be for people walking and biking. And I count parking in as part of that because it adds as a buffer for those who walk. So it's just to set the stage for that, and then go to your community. And one thing that I first assess is you've got a very good amount focused for this principle, but you can do better. and we'll get into that. So you've currently got 24 feet of space for movement of cars, and you've got good buffers, and you've got reasonably comfortable sidewalks. We'll get into that more. And also to set the stage, I love to go back to Kevin Lynch. His wonderful book, The Image of the City, lays out the parameters of what makes a city come alive for walking. And we look at the paths. That could be anything that people move on: streets, walkways, transit lines, even waterways or rail. The edges then become important. So this is a element that really brings out the walking. And then to have beautiful districts, unique, distinct, each one, and then nodes. And then nodes are the intersections, and to honor and even celebrate them, and then have landmarks. And you've got all of these in abundance. So let's start with the most basic of all, the sidewalk. I'm just going to use an example, another Colorado town. When a sidewalk is attached to the street and there's no buffer, it's a very uncomfortable way to move. And so I like to emphasize that if a sidewalk is to work, there needs to be a shy zone from the walls, fences, anything. And that's typically 2 feet. And then there has to be a place to put all the furniture so that you're now left with a good place for people to walk and to talk. People love to linger. And this is the perfect place to do that if you have adequate width. So I take your sidewalk parts, a wonderful furniture zone in this section. Note, we've even got the help of a door that's open to show why a shy zone needs to be 2 feet. So anything that is in either of these two zones is not where someone will walk. And that leaves a very clean area for walking. We can look at several sections of your sidewalks and see the emphasis that's made. For purposes of an older person, concrete's ideal, but I also celebrate this walk-talk zone. This material absorbs moisture pretty well and is very firm. And so I love how Elk Street has come alive. And you even have the bonus of an art zone. You can see how other people have done it. This is a much warmer climate, Carmel, California. But notice their street furniture isn't as articulated and collected together, but it works. And it only works because of the parking and the on-street parking, that buffer. The green edge is wonderful. And the window transparency provides the security to the street. You can see a different sidewalk, this in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And note again, the very distinct elements. And every one of these elements becomes critical to whether people will walk or not. And so I totally celebrate much of the sidewalk system on Elk Street. It's not uniform, and the variety is actually something that is really worth working for. Now let's get into the best practices, what others have done who want to become walkable. Another very small town, Big Fork, Montana, has less than 2,000 people. But look at the wonderful way that their streets have been laid out, and so that their principal street gets celebrated. And again, compliments and kudos to Crested Butte for having your pioneers figure all this out for you. Now let's get to the local streets. This is where I live on the left. And our street is only 12 feet wide, and it's a two-way street. And it is now more populated by people walking and biking than people driving. And just amazing. Another part of our town, note that we've used different materials. to create that canvas. This is a one-way street, and it works pretty well for the purposes of getting to a parking space. And if you go further down, their celebration of keeping the speeds down at almost walking speed, in this case, is accented with some speed bumps. You don't normally put bumps in. Humps are a little softer, but this seems to keep the speeds right down to that level. Not that I'm a fan of vertical changes. This was built by a resident with approval by the city. It's not only a piece of art, but it helps keep the speeds low. Intersections are the best place to set the stage for speed. And this one has been working beautifully for 20 years. And the cost was under $100. So prorate that out over 20 or 30 years, and you've got pretty inexpensive traffic calming. Other mini circles can be much larger, in this case, to fit the form, to hold the speeds down, and yet celebrate the rural character of Pittsford in this case. Another tool is one that we tried in Batesville, Arkansas. When I was asked to bring the speeds down on this street and bring back the life to Main Street, I thought, well, let's go back to a two-way street. But then I thought about it more, and we came up with this concept. It's in place, although this is a photomorph. The actual solution is very close to that. We took out the second travel lane and went down to a single lane, and then did a shift at each intersection. Very effective. And then we maxed out the parking, and it really truly brought back the life to the Batesville downtown, gave ourselves more green. And so now going to Google Earth, I noted that you've gone through a phase where you put in your shared space, come out, and this will be a discussion point, I'm sure, as to how it worked and what other things you might do. And again, how do you create the edges that are going to be part of what brings down the speed of traffic, just because you maintain and build a very powerful set of solutions. I don't know if edge lane is in your discussion, but it's a new concept. It's one I've been promoting for most of my career. I just call it center lane removal. This is our downtown. We took out the double yellow center lane. This is because we have no alleys. This is where all our deliveries get made. And so what happens is it's a two-way street. When a motorist encounters a freight delivery, they are given permission to come into the bike lane, and our speeds stay down around 10 to 12 miles per hour downtown. In a more local street level, we've got 4 on the ground now so far. Typically what we try to do is between the dashed lines, get down to no more than 16 feet, and then leave all the rest of the space for pedestrians. So I'm just trying to plant some seeds of what others have done. In this case, you can see another section, but we typically, with each of our treatments, brought the speeds down about 7 miles per hour, and just with paint, and given a much greater support system for walking and biking. Other communities have carved out the space for walking in this way. Note that none of these streets have sidewalks. There are many places in Port Townsend where we just would not want sidewalks, including my own street. And again, I'm just giving you some visuals of what others have done. And I would prefer it if the car space was the space you're looking directly at, right? And then all the rest of the spaces for walking and biking, and make it a two-way street. And you would have a dash line if you were to do that. And finally, or on the engineering side, we're wanting to look at the possibilities of runoffs. They're just the most beautiful solution, and there are places in Crested Butte that I think would just be ideal. And I'll just go quickly through the images of what the elements are. It's one of my favorites. Many neighborhood streets in Holland look just like this, and it's a place for people. And if a car needs access for whatever reason, drop off a piano, whatever, you just come in but do it at the proper speed. Some similar treatments, which we call shared streets, on the left, Manhattan Beach, because they have alleys, they've just chosen to make their streets only for people, no cars. There might be a reason, say for an emergency, where cars would come in. On the one on the right, that was already a yield street, and probably 32 feet wide. And what they did is they created this curvilinear path. This is still a two-way street, but it really, even though they have sidewalks, most people walk in the street because they want to look at properties on both sides and just be part of the cultural order. Other streets that follow this pattern in the U.S., Asheville, North Carolina, this is called Wall Street. You can probably figure out why they call it Wall Street, but there are only a few hours a day where deliveries are made on the street, and the rest of the day it belongs to the people. One of my very favorite streets in the world is this particular street in London, and I think you can see how they honor all the social activities of people first. So with all that said, I want to set a stage for our discussion. And in this case, looking at your street, this one is currently posted at 15, and but the street to me reads 20, if not even 30 miles per hour. It's too straight, and it doesn't have any reason for a person to slow down other than knowing that they might get a ticket. So this is the canvas that you'll be working from, obviously. And a lot of the tools I just showed you would apply here. I really feel that you've got the right opportunities to make this a great place. I know parking has been studied in Crested Butte, and these are findings of the parking study. And I think it's important for parking to be a tool, and one that helps you bring down the speeds, create the buffer, and not to be abused. Almost every town in America I've ever worked in, the traffic is being abused. There is an emphasis that you're already making in your town code. I think you always have, to not put the cars out in front of a place. And in this case, nearby, Durango, I think has created the most authentic of all places by putting their art and allowing people to gather and to enjoy. Other tools for parking that are fairly popular. This is Avon, and I think you can see from the scrubbed out lines, this used to be a 5-lane road. They're wanting to make this now an authentic place for commerce, for social life of the street. So they've already narrowed it down to 2 lanes. And then they asked us if we could propose some further actions. So we gave them 2 choices. These again are photomorphs. You can see that one choice would be to control the speeds through the intersections, in this case with a roundabout. And if you use back in angle parking, you could put bike lanes in right out front. And then they wanted another choice, so we gave them a more standard but a compact intersection and a different pattern and this is a protected bike lane. They were able to get behind the parking. Again, your dimensions are different, but at least it shows how different tools can be put to use. Lancaster, California, which used to be a 5-lane road, speeds were up in the 40s, but this is their downtown. So we went through a visioning process, and what they were able to do is put the parking in the center, in their case, and then bring the speed down to about 10 miles an hour. And it's already brought about $750 million of new development to the downtown and really made it alive. I am a strong advocate of back in angled parking. Not only is it safer for people walking or biking, but it is much safer for the motorist. Note that they were able to keep their travel lane down to 8 feet and keep the parking down to 15 feet and max out their angle parking at 60 feet. The back end is important, so the street furniture needs to be appropriate for people backing in. And another topic I know is a hot issue, maybe it's a cold issue, is snow. And first of all, obviously celebrate the fact that you are a snow city, a winter city. But these are just some examples of what some of the issues are. Some topics like heated sidewalks, which you have some, and what the solutions might be. What the tools are, I don't really know what tools you already have in place, but depending on whether you get light and infrequent clear out to superstorms, determines how you'll clear the paths, and whether it would be done by private property owners or by an entire city. In this case, Hamburg, New York has bought the right equipment, and it's just part of the service to any resident that their sidewalks will be cleared. I love the treatments. They're very effective. And so with that, I want to leave you with one final, what I'll just refer to as a litmus test for design, that whatever changes you make in the future, does the change reward the short trip, act of transportation, place, and people? And if it doesn't, why are you making that decision? I feel this serves the community very well. But again, I couldn't be more honored to be part of this webinar series and to celebrate how advanced your community is. It was hard to build this show because you go so far beyond where other people are, but you can be so much better, and you have the canvas to do that. So with that, we'll close with one of my favorite actors. And I really feel this is true, that this, with the series of planning steps you're making, with the wonderful staff you have and the elected leadership, that it's time to move forward and be awesome. With that, I'm going to turn it back, if that's okay.
Thank you so much, Dan. We so appreciate your expertise being here today. And with that, we'd love to open it up to questions for Dan. So what I'm going to do is, if you're still on the Menti, I will reshare the screen and the code for a brief moment and then bring it back so you can fully see Dan. You can type in questions there, as well as use the raise hand feature on the webinar if you have a question. So let me go ahead and reshare briefly. So here's the code at the top if you want to type in a question, but otherwise feel free to hit that raise hand button if you have a question for Dan. Anyone out there with questions? So I'm seeing a first question pop up. Dan, we're a 50-mile-per-hour town. Do you think we need to drop that speed?
Well, first of all, congratulations on being a 15-mile-per-hour town. There are very few certainly in the North American continent. Everyone would love to achieve that. I guess the question is, even though you are a 15-mile-per-hour town, what is your average speed? And if it's a bit high, or if some people just aren't getting it, how do you better deliver that message? There are places where you might want to have a lower speed limit, but the design speed, what we call the target speed, needs to say that. It needs to say you should not be going more than 10 miles an hour. I would say many of your side streets that come into Elk can be and probably should be lower speed for sure. And again, I don't have the background to know what your actual speeds are, but
Dan, this is Troy. Our actual
Yeah, Troy.
speeds, we've just finished a study. Our actual speed is around 18 miles an hour.
18. Okay.
That's what the 85th percentile is showing.
Okay. And that would be on local streets as well as Elk?
Yep. Well, Elk is lower. We got Elk down to 11 miles an hour.
All right. Good. And that's well within the range of what the best producing streets are for social life of the street and retail life of the street. So you may want to a further look at the speeds, but those are pretty. Everyone else would be dreaming of speeds down at that level. But if you have occasional people driving faster, then you need to put more attention into that. Yeah. So.
Thanks, Dan. We have another question on the board. How do we convey to visitors from car-centered communities our values about pedestrian traffic?
We're a very comparable town in many ways. We're a town of more population. We're 10,000, Port Townsend, Washington. But every time I come back from a trip, when I'm out working and come back, I have to re-gauge myself to be in Port Townsend. I think it's done best through gateways. And then, of course, as people get that message, they change their behavior, say, well, this is a little different. And then have other reminders, but when we do like curb extensions or medians or chicanes, whatever effect we're striving for, that really gets the message across to the extent that you can. More green, that really also, but I think am I right about this, that most of the higher speeds are people who feel comfortable on the street? And again, I'm just not knowledgeable about what your actual speeding conditions are, and will your speed studies indicate who's doing the speeding? Is it a local or is it a visitor?
We haven't differentiated. We're getting some origin destination study. The majority of the trips in town will know in about a week or two. So the
Okay.
speeding data right now is aggregated to everyone. We haven't been able to break it out yet.
Okay. Taking concepts nationwide, the people doing the speeding are typically the people who live on the street. And I can absolutely authenticate that just from my own street. I look down on the street from where I have the little work center here. And I can assure you that I've never seen anyone speed who's an outsider. I know everybody who lives on the street, and I know which of my neighbors are doing the speeding, and I've never seen anyone from outside, unless it was a cut through situation. There are people that inappropriately do that, but it's always been local traffic that's doing the speeding, and every town I've worked in. Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. I just want to put in a quick note with Menti. I'll need to fix a setting for the next webinar to be able to put in another question, but if you have a follow-up question and it's not letting you type it in, just feel free to hit that raise hand button so you can ask out. But next up, Dan, you've talked about how snow is a really big player in our town, and we have very specific plowing operations, and we do clear our sidewalks as well. When it comes to kind of traffic calming methods, you talked about like the center intersection structures. Could they work here? Are there differences with like temporary or seasonal traffic calming that you've seen, and what are your thoughts there?
Yes. First of all, don't let snowplow operators design your streets for you. They need to be working year round. Uh, every snowplow operator can learn the new ways to go around anything. And the most important thing is don't stop them. Let them stay in motion. Once they stop and have to pick up that load again, that's an issue. So tools like mini circles work beautifully. In fact, I meant to put in a photo, I just couldn't find it, where a town that was going to build a series of mini circles decided, well, let's just plow our snow into the middle of the street. And they created mini circles using their winter setting, and it worked beautifully. And the snowplow operators can figure this one out pretty quickly. Both curb extensions, medians, and mini circles all work beautifully with a proper snowplow operations. Yeah.
That's a great example. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the strategies you discussed today work well for people using wheelchairs?
Yes, the concepts, the principles all apply. And I want to say that most of my experiences in your community, I found it reasonable to get around. Obviously, the ramps are very important. Not to have a bunch of interrupting driveways that aren't well designed and fit in. But yes, the principles and the concepts that we're discussing are meant to be supportive, not just of a person in a wheelchair, but people might have a visual acuity issue or just a balance issue. Very recently, while in a project in Costa Rica, I found it was just impossible to walk. It's like I couldn't go more than 100 feet before there was the next barrier, right? So I think focus on barrier removal and adequate width walkways or adequate structure to your street so that a person in a wheelchair is not being disabled by your design.
Dan, I'm going to ask you a verbal question because my Menti's not working. We have a lot of streets, if not most of our streets, except 6th and Elk, do not have sidewalks. Right, and so at 15 miles an hour as our posted speed, are pedestrians safer in the street or on sidewalks?
I think you're safer in the street. And I
Why
say
is that?
Well, number of things, reasons why 15 miles per hour gives a person a lot of decision time as a driver. And when you're in the street, you're more visible and you're part of the traffic calming solution. Well, the more we take back our streets, the more the motors are going to behave. And as a gentle reminder, the presence of children, of elders, of people of all ages walking and biking in the street, that's what brings down the speed more than anything else you can do, right? So, yeah, we have lots of streets that do have sidewalks on both sides. They're local streets. And myself and almost everyone would prefer to walk in the middle of the street. And yeah, just knowing that, yeah, if I want to, I can go up and use the sidewalk. But no, I want to be part of my town. And in this case, because the speeds are so low and the traffic is well distributed and very light, walking in the street works quite well. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you, Dan. I'm going to do another call out there for questions, so type in or raise your hand. And
I'll
as
ask a
folks
question
are
while
pondering.
someone's
Okay.
typing. This is Troy again. Dan, we have a need, probably a very appropriate reaction to traffic signals in Crested Butte, or the fear of them in terms of changing character and sending a message. Can you talk pros and cons from a pedestrian's point of view between a signal, a roundabout, and an all-way stop?
Sure. First of all, the safest intersection anyone has ever built is always a roundabout or mini circle, depending on the size or the scale. And there are 90% fewer fatals in a roundabout than either four-way stops or signals. People make mistakes with signals. They make a lot of them, and they can be very serious. Where a roundabout, you have to go out of your way to find any way to have any kind of a crash in a roundabout. Number one, because low speeds, 15 to 20 miles an hour is what they're designed for. Number two, they eliminate the possibility of a T-bone crash where you go straight into another car or another car comes into you. And with a few other factors, it's just amazing how much safer, quieter, more environmental friendly a roundabout is. So a number of states are adopting a roundabouts first policy. I believe our state, Washington, has that policy in place. And we won't look at a intersection for a signal unless we prove that the roundabout is not the right option for that particular intersection. So yes, for all the things we discussed, whether it's a gateway, creating place, reducing noise, the threat to transform motors, the roundabout is and should be the number one option. And there are places they won't work, but whenever they do, they bring more peace of mind to everyone. For walking, one of the problems of signals is you have to wait, and you almost have to wait like, it depends on the size and scale, but you have to wait long periods of time. And with a roundabout, you basically go right in because of the way the roundabout is designed. And so where you might be just a little more out of route travel as a pedestrian, it's not something that is that bothersome because it's not that far out of the way. We also design roundabouts and anything we do to make sure that we're fully covering people who have visual impairment. So we put on training course to our designers to make sure they're well trained in what the needs are of our elders and our people that have visual acuity issues, so that we accommodate that in our design as well. We're putting one in, a new one in our town that will also have a rectangular rapid flash beacon that anyone crossing can push for further activation. But we fully accommodate people with visual acuity as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. So we have a comment and a question around cars backing out of the right-of-way parking or driveways and facing the street to be one of the greatest pedestrian biking dangers in the town. Should we think about changing head-in parking and right-of-ways to back-in parking?
I think it's a powerful tool for Crested Butte. You might want to start on one side street. Do it as a weekend activity and like a pop-up demonstration, and talk about the pros and the cons, and then expand it to several side streets, and then eventually consider it for other parking needs throughout the community. But there is nothing that comes close to the safety of back-in angled parking. It's safe for the motorist and certainly for personal walking and biking, as I was able to illustrate with that one image. You can get your street widths down very tight if you use back-in angled parking. Yeah.
Thanks, Thanks, Dan. I'd love to follow up with that with a kind of closing question. And I love how you mentioned like the idea of experimenting or a pop-up, and many of the examples you showed about different towns kind of transforming their streets. When our cities have planned for cars for so long, implementing that change can be challenging for communities. And we've definitely found like transportation projects in the town, most recently the hot Elk Avenue one-way, two-way debate, implementing parking management, traffic calming. They're very, we have very strong opinions on both sides, and our community gets pretty split as we go about it, planning this transportation plan. Do you have any kind of tools or ideas on how we navigate that and approaching potential changes or new ideas with our community?
Yes. First, congratulations on this webinar series. I think this is so important, and the fact that you're recording it, that many people will be able to participate in. But I think the important thing is, because change is hard, everything you do, consider doing a model. You know, whether it's a 1 or 2 block treatment or a weekend treatment, whatever you do, get people out there and get them to talk it through so that they can see what the advantages are and so on. And then if you're going to go to a longer term treatment, make sure it's long enough that you get past the self-doubters at first, right? But do the weekend or whatever length of time you want to do as a test, but then make sure that whatever you're going to do is going to be longer lived than your normal doubters just saying, what kind of a thing have you done to me, right? Yeah, it's so sad that we've taken so much effort to reward the motorist. Now it's time to start rewarding the pedestrian, the bicyclist, the transit user. And I can't think of a better town than Crested Butte, because so many people come and visit to then show other people what they should be doing as well. I'm so proud of you guys.
Well, thank you, Dan. What a great note to end on. Let's all give a big round of applause from where we are in our Zoom boxes for Dan for being here today. And as we wrap up, I just want to promote the rest of our webinar series coming up. So if you haven't registered already or want to plan on watching the recordings, we have next week Jim Charlier presenting on increasing safety through calmer streets. So really talking about the traffic and speed side, the car perspective. Then we have navigating change, implementing a community mobility division. And then our final 2 webinars will be all about parking as well as transit. 2 other reminders: if you haven't yet taken our mobility survey, please do. The QR code is there and the link is on the transportation plan website. And please spread the word to your family, your friends. We will be out doing some surveying at different bus stops, at different employers and all throughout town over this next month to try to get more responses. But it's such helpful data for us to have to understand how you move around Crested Butte. And then lastly, we are going to be conducting a winter walking audit next Wednesday afternoon on March 15th. I want to thank Chris Hensley and the Adaptive Sports Center. Chris is on the webinar today. Thank you for being open to coordinate that walking audit with us. And if you are interested in participating to experience what it's like to move around in Crested Butte in the winter, whether by feet, with crutches, in a wheelchair, please email transportation@crestedbutte-co.gov to sign up for that. And then we will also be hosting another summer version of that later this spring as well. So stay tuned. So thank you so much again for being here today. Thank you very much, Dan, for joining us. And we hope to see you all next week. Thanks, everyone.